Well, the Cleveland Cavaliers are struggling, and injuries have been a big part of that. Kevin Love, of course, at the top of that list. Larry Nance Jr., the most recent addition to that list. Former Laker out the next 2 to 4 weeks and will not play against his own team. Let's welcome in Fred McLeod, play-by-play voice for the Cavs. Fred, back in November when LeBron returned to Cleveland, there was a certain energy to that game. Cavs kept that one close, losing by just 4. With LeBron out and this game being played in L.A., how different are you expecting the atmosphere to be tonight?
You know, it's always fun, Chris, when you come to L.A., even in the prior years that they've struggled with the 4 seasons, of course, going to the lottery. There's still a buzz here. You still have the famous faces, but obviously when you 23 is not on the floor and against his old team, it loses a little bit of luster, but still we expect a heck of a ball game. Both teams can score the ball, so, we on the Cavs side of things miss seeing LeBron on the floor because he's a once-in-a-generational talent, and we know what he meant to the city of Cleveland, and, at least I'll get to say hi to him anyway.
And Fred, with that being said, how hard has it been for the young guys to hear of all the great things you witnessed the last 4 with LeBron and now saying he's not there? How hard has it been for those guys to go through this?
Not at all. I think, first of all, Dennis, I think we're in a much better place than we were in 2010 without question. A younger core, assets in place, so they know it's a learning curve. Listen, they've all grown up, watching LeBron dominate the league as much as he has, and so now they have to carve their own path, and the organization's really excited. Got an owner that knows to preach patience right now, to let this thing unfold and build it bit by bit. And as you know, look at the Denver Nuggets. They went through a 5-year drought, and now they're going to be back into the playoffs. And the Lakers themselves, every team goes through it. So the Cavs, it's our turn, so to speak, to build a new chapter and build a new future. And with guys like Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr. and Jetty Osman, there's some formative pieces here. Now you just have to be you can't make mistakes on draft night, and Kobe Altman and his front office certainly know that and are fully getting ready for this upcoming draft.
Guys, I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of the Cavs second halves with Fred and Austin Carr. And Fred, it seems like this young group can find enough energy for about 24 minutes, but then come that third quarter, there's a major plunge as far as them not being able to sustain it and continue the energy they gave for the first 24 minutes. It's getting to be a frustrating situation for the team, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, Mike, not only is it youthful learning, but it's attrition. You showed that graphic. Losing 3 bigs off the top right now and your best perimeter defender. So go right down the list. Let's say Indiana, you take out Sabonis, and I'm not making excuses, but it's reality. Take out Sabonis, take out Turner, take out Thad Young, take out their best perimeter defender. Go to Boston, take out Baines, take out Horford, Marcus Morris, Marcus Smart, and things are a little bit different. You still have great players out there with Kyrie Irving and Victor Oladipo, but it's just attrition, Mike, and it's been so difficult. And recently we've missed Rodney Hood for 7 games and Tristan Thompson prior to that for 10. So Larry Drew has said he's never in his 38 years of playing or coaching in the NBA ever seen such a destruction of a roster with key injuries. And so you just got to bide your time until they get back on the floor.
Well, the season didn't start out the way the Cavs had hoped they did. So as a result, we've seen certain players moved on now. Korver's gone, George Hill's gone, JR is not with the team. But some guys have stepped up. Clarkson has increased his value, in my opinion.
Yes.
Then a guy like Thompson comes back, and if Thompson is a piece you need for your team, or Kevin Love, who has a very nice contract, 3 years left after this year on his contract, and even a guy like Hood, there's trade value there. Would you expect the Cavs to make another move before trade deadline?
In terms of actually helping this season, you think? Is that what you're asking?
Or getting who knows, you get another first-round pick down the road. Isn't that part of what it's all about?
Yeah, exactly. I think they'll survey any possible scenario to see, what's going to help not only short-term but long-term. Losing Kevin was such a difficult loss, not only a 5-time All-Star, but part of the maturation of having Colin Sexton grow is to having guys like Kevin in the very first bucket of the season. He caught a pass and set up another player for a dunk. And, Colin doesn't have that option right now, a go-to guy in the block, as you're seeing, or a guy that can flash to the corner. And so Colin's had to carry a lot of that scoring load on his own, but he's a really willing worker, a sponge. He attacks the rack, as we know, with great speed. But he's seeing things more now, and he says he's really tough on himself, but he expects to be able to continue to mature. He's leaning on Matthew Dellavedova, leaning on Larry Drew, who played the point guard position for 10 years. So I love the dog in him, so to speak, and 3D, you can speak to that. That's a compliment to a guy who's got a great motor and wants to improve. He wants to be great, and so time will tell.
Cavs Lakers play tonight at 9:30. Fred McLeod, play-by-play voice for the Cavaliers. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, Chris. Thanks, fellas.
All right, Freddie.
Thank you, Fred.
Let's continue that conversation in particular about a guy like Kevin Love. He's been hurt for a big part of the season, so we're not hearing his name. But when you look at where Cleveland is, worst record in the NBA, you look at a guy, Kevin Love, who can clearly contribute on a team that's trying to contend. Do you imagine that he'll still be on this roster past the trade deadline as teams are looking to improve to make a playoff push?
Things happen that you can't predict. Okay, so at the time that Cleveland signed Kevin to a 4-year contract this past summer, everyone was like, wow, they made the commitment to Kevin Love. And they wanted Kevin there, and they wanted to be in the playoffs this year. But then after 4 games, Kevin is out, and then the series of injuries that we've just talked about pile up. They finally make that decision, you know what, this isn't going the way we thought it was going to go. We can get some value, so Korver's moved on. George Hill has moved on. The reasons for JR not being with the team right now, other teams are sitting out there. They want JR.
Right.
They're just waiting for the Cavs to cut him so they can pick him up rather than have to do a deal and give up a second-round pick or whatever it might be. So this team now has changed direction, and they are in the rebuild mode. Kevin is a huge piece. His contract is not that bad. 3 more years. And if you trade for him, you've got him for 3 more years after this year. So it's not like you get him, you're worried he's going to walk away on you like a Kawhi Leonard situation. So I think something else will happen before trade deadline. If it's Kevin, you know what, 5-time All-Star, he deserves to play with a good team.
And certainly the Cleveland Cavaliers looking to stock up on draft picks. It'll be interesting to see if Love is moved for one of those. Good game coming on tonight. The Nuggets and the Blazers. That is correct. Jokic getting his dance on. We're going to check in on the Joker next. You're watching Game Time Live.
Get it, big fella. Get it. Dab on him, dab on him, dab on him, dab on him.
Big bye with the man of the night.
Thanks, guys. Well, Dennis, after you lose a close.
So the Oklahoma City Thunder bounced back after falling to the San Antonio Spurs 2 nights ago, 122-112. And Dennis Schroeder, what you don't see there, the 4 steals and the big plays he made down the stretch, Brendan, for OKC, he was incredible.
Schroeder, Abdul Nader, they were both incredible off the bench. They came in with incredible energy, and Schroeder, especially in the second half, end of the third, beginning of the fourth, to the middle of the fourth quarter, he really brought some energy. He was the spark. He was the reason why the OKC Thunder were able to win this game tonight. That trade that they made, giving away Carmelo Anthony to get Schroeder in, it didn't seem like a big deal in the summertime. This is probably going to be one of those deals that we look back, if OKC makes a run, it's going to be because of the play of guys like Schroeder and what they were able to do.
Well, it seemed big from a financial standpoint. It was a $70 million proposition. Oof. And at the time, everybody talked about it as though it was a cash savings deal. And I think you've seen now that Sam Presti and his staff had a really good understanding what Dennis Schroeder could bring to this team, and every night he's getting an opportunity to make an impact, and it's not a surprise that they've got Dennis and Russ playing together down the stretch of big games.
Are you surprised at how much of an impact he's had defensively for them? Because those were the plays that really stood out most this game against the Spurs.
I'm not surprised because he had the talent. It's not what he was doing before. And I think this environment is one that he's taken to. The culture there in Oklahoma City, the accountability that Billy Donovan has brought to that team obviously is something that Dennis is wearing very well.
Brendan, we got some. Karl Anthony Towns, 27 rebounds, the most by an NBA player this season. 27 points to go along with that. Oh, yeah. And a stop on Anthony Davis in the final seconds of this one. Just an amazing performance from him. And he just seems aggressive. And this is what we thought we would get from him at the end of last season, beginning of this season. He's certainly out of his shell.
Yeah, he's taken over as the leader that they wanted him to be. You heard during that broadcast that he's starting to lead some of the other young guys as well. And the rebounding performance stands out to me among the many things that's unique right now with this version of Karl Anthony Towns.
I agree with you totally. He's having a great. He's doing great from a rebounding standpoint and from a scoring standpoint, and he's now the leader. I think that trade kind of worked out for both teams. Philly needed somebody like Jimmy Butler to score on the perimeter, and Minnesota kind of needed Jimmy Butler to be out of the way so that Karl could become who they envisioned him being, because it was just never going to work with Jimmy there. And that's not a knock on Jimmy. It was just he was in the way of the growth of Karl Anthony Towns. We're seeing him play a lot better basketball right now.
And certainly, even for Andrew Wiggins, who took 21 shots, he was just 7 for 21, but down the stretch, he looked more confident and comfortable with the ball in his hands.
Well, I think for Andrew, it comes down to, once again, he had to adjust to being the third option when Jimmy Butler was there. Now that Jimmy's not there, Tibbs is no longer there, I think he feels a certain level of freedom. He now knows that he has more range and he has more opportunity because he's now the true number 2 option. So his role is more clearly defined as it was a couple years ago. When you're the third option, that's tough. You have to be the most selfless person, and sometimes that doesn't always work out. So I think Wiggins is more comfortable in the number 2 role, and I think Ryan Saunders will probably be a more mild-mannered coach, and I think that'll work well with Wiggins' personality.
Well, I think you saw their second best player today might have been their bench as a whole. They outscored the Pelicans 36-7 off the bench. And with Mirotić now playing just his second game back after missing 16 games, and Peyton finding form, trying to find form after missing 31 games, he's only in his 6th game. It's unfortunate in the Western Conference that you say this because it's such an unforgiving conference. But they're now 3 games back in the loss column of a playoff spot, and this New Orleans team doesn't really have the time to find a rhythm. They need to just hit the ground running right now, and it's hurting them.
When you look at the situation in New Orleans, a lot of times the conversation is, oh, Anthony Davis, well, he needs to do a little bit more. But when you look at that bench, they only have 2 guys that scored off that New Orleans Pelicans bench. You can't expect to win games, especially if you're trying to make a playoff push. Like the Pelicans and the Timberwolves are 2 teams in that playoff picture. But if you're not getting bench production, that's going to be tough, right, bro?
How many people scored off the bench?
2. And they got 13 points total. It was 9 from Mirotić and 4 from Darius Miller. I'm sorry, 3 players. Frank Jackson also with 4.
Wow. Yeah,
so 3 players.
It's going to be really hard to score with that level of bench production because you sometimes need a little bit of pop off your bench, just something that can give your starters a little bit of a blower. When you go to your bench, can lift your team up. When your bench is struggling like that, that's not a good sign.
Well, what you really see that they lack, Anthony Davis had 5 fouls late in this game. And there was a situation where it's a 3-point game. Karl Anthony Towns gets the ball on the left wing and just rips and goes right by Mirotić. Well, that needs to be Anthony Davis guarding him, but he's got 5 fouls. They don't have another defensive big that they can put into a game to do anything to stem the tide against a guy like Karl Anthony Towns. They just don't have the depth of size right now for a lot of different reasons, and it showed tonight again.
Yeah, that's certainly an issue that New Orleans clearly has. And then flipping back over to Minnesota and looking where they're headed, Ryan Saunders now 2-1 as the head coach there. That's a situation where this time last week it was like, okay, they made a change. It seems as if this team, win or lose, they're headed in the right direction as far as where their mindset is.
Well, I think sometimes it's about, is everybody on the same page? And fair or foul, I don't think a lot of the younger players were on the same page with Coach Tibbs. And so if you realize that and your management going forward, then you have to get somebody in there that relates to those younger guys, can convey the message that you want conveyed from upper management standpoint, and then we can move forward with that plan. And I think Ryan Saunders fits that mold.
And you can tell they're buying into it.
Yes, certainly great to see Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Davis go at it.